So I would like to start out by inviting any reactions to the exam that you just took. Anybody has any thoughts to share, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute your mic and speak. Alexi, I did get your comment and I will pay attention to that as long as I can figure out, if it's readable, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So anybody would like to offer any comments or reactions to the exam? Was it easy? Was it hard?
I think it was quite okay, a bit tight on time, but I think there kind of has to be some pressure. So
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't intend to be pressure, to put any pressure. Last year I gave 60 minutes for the same number of questions. This time I gave 80. I guess there is Murphy's law, activities expand to fill the time available. So I hope you were brief in your answers because it's not a test of everything you know about marketing. You just have to answer the specific questions, right? So, but time is always an issue. Anything else?
Well, I like that the structure was same in every single question, so it was nice to fill out because you kind of knew what you had to target on.
Yeah. So, that's part of integrated communications, right? You want consistency so that people are clear about what they have to do. So, thank you. Any other comments?
I found that the most difficult part probably for me was the examples because like knowing and then remembering specific exact like examples of companies. So what I did was I remembered that, or I knew that a company did something along the lines of that, but maybe I didn't remember, the partner company they did it with or something. So then I just tried to like describe it. And I think that was the most difficult part, knowing like exact examples of these concepts.
Okay, so I hope you improvise. That is, you did
Yeah.
some description, or you could even make up a hypothetical example. It won't get full credit, but at least it will get partial credit, right? And you know, I understand when you're new to the subject, the examples might be difficult, but also realize the importance of knowing examples as a dimension of understanding, right? It's academic to know the thing in your head, but if you can't apply it to an example, then you really haven't fully understood. So I hope that this will, you know, this is a work in progress. You're all in learning mode. So hopefully this will, get better as you finish the course as well as do more courses in the program.
I actually have another thing. I also like the fact that you were able to leave 2 questions out, so it's not like you have to know absolutely everything, and if you don't know something, then that will ruin your whole exam because it's kind of a lot that we go through in a week.
Yes, definitely. To me, this is a very unique program, to be condensed into 15 days and 45 hours. I teach the same course here in a 15-week semester where we meet for 3 hours per week. So there is more time to read and assimilate and discuss things. So absolutely, yeah, that is the constraint of the program. But I'm sure you also enjoy the benefit of finishing it in 2.5 years and then going for your exchange, right? So it is an accelerated program. And again, you're all giving up part of your summer to do this. So that's really nice. Okay, any other closing thoughts? The reason I'm inviting feedback is because I would like to have the final the same format as this one. It's a little bit longer and it'll have more questions, but the format will be exactly the same unless I get some feedback about some design changes. So think about it. You don't have to tell me right now. If something else comes up, you can tell me in a later class or shoot me an email. I'm very receptive to making changes if they are required. But again, if you're now familiar with the format, it might just be good to be consistent and have it similar in the final exam.
I would say like that maybe it's not as much of a critic as the exam as of maybe myself, but like generally I felt a little bit shaky on the exact definition of the concepts. Like when basically every one of the ones that we had, I had a pretty like good idea. Like, oh, I know what this relates to. Oh, I know generally the subject. But then when I have to write down like the definition of the thing, it's kind of hard to grasp on. But that's probably more of poor preparation than like
No, I think it is also writing skill. Writing is disciplined thinking, right? So if it's in your head, it's still fuzzy, but the act of putting it in words, it really makes you critically think about what's in your head and what's the most important thing to write. So again, I think it's a good exercise in critical thinking. And of course, I understand that for many of you, English is not your first language, so that makes it challenging. But again, when I've been reading your memos on the farm electronics case, and I think most people have a pretty good command of English, and the writing skills are consistent with my expectations. So yeah, I think if you wanted to do better in the final, maybe you make some notes during the lecture as we discuss concepts. It's one thing to passively listen, but if you print out the PowerPoints or you have them in a PDF, maybe you could annotate them and then review them before the next exam. But I understand, Eric, for what you're saying. Thank you. All right, so we'll get done with that. The exam is over. I'm certainly going to grade it and return everything to you by next week. I'm actually in the final stages of finishing up on the case memo, farm electronics. So I'm going to send you an email when I finish my grading, probably tomorrow morning when you wake up. You'll have an email in your inbox from me saying that you can go to your assignment and check out the comments and the grade. And I want to get that done by tomorrow because you'll be working on your second case, right? Which is due on Friday. Let me just confirm which case that is, the second case. Yes, the next case is called HubSpot and Motion AI, which you will, prepare between now and submit on Monday as a case memo, right? It's more complex than the farm electronics case, but it is somewhat related. HubSpot is a marketing automation software. If you recall from some of our discussions, in B2B sales, initially you have to do lead generation, tracking, and qualification. And that's done in a software called marketing automation software. And I give you some examples like Marketo, Eloqua, and so on. HubSpot is a competitor. So you'll get a very detailed look at how leads are, given points and how they are nurtured and then handed over to the sales force when they are a qualified lead. So it's about marketing that software, and I think that it's a very interesting case. So I will, when you get my comments on the memo tomorrow, please do review them and then write your memo. Don't write your memo before getting the feedback from the first case, because then you lose an opportunity to revise and improve according to my expectations. So that's the agenda. Now I'm going to go to chapter 10, which is on the agenda for today. We'll do some PowerPoints, easy listening, right? Please do interrupt me with questions or comments if you have any. Just give me a moment to pull this up. Right. So now we are getting into the details of the 4 P's. Starting with, I mean, we already started with promotion and communication before the midterm, and now we are getting into the second P, which is product. And when we say product, we really mean product offering, which could be a combination of product and service, or it could be a pure service, doesn't matter. For this chapter, when we talk of product, we are talking about the revenue generation opportunity. What is it that rings the cashier's register? What do you buy? That's what the product offering is. And again, please let me know if the slide is not visible. I hope these are. So, every company, if it's a startup or an entrepreneurial venture, it will start out with some very basic product, and that product has a core benefit, which is common to all the competitors in the industry. When we talk of a, say, economic compact car, the core benefit is that it must get you from point A to point B safely, right? That's the generic need of or benefit of transportation. But then, the customers are not always happy with one size fits all. So then the sellers, they try to innovate, and they try to embellish the generic product along many different dimensions. You might add some physical some physical attributes. Do you remember there's a famous quotation from Henry Ford, who was the founder of the Ford Motor Company back in the 1920s in the USA. He said initially, when the first Ford car was launched, you can have any color of car you want, provided it is black, right? So that shows a lack of differentiation. But later on, definitely Ford started adding colors. So that's an example of expansion of physical attributes. You might embellish on the service elements. So, the Ford Motor Company started opening dealerships, and then these dealerships would do the oil changes and, brakes and maintenance and so on. And then finally, you could, embellish your generic product by giving advice to the customer. This is like consulting services. How can the customer improve their operations, improve their strategy, reduce costs, increase profits, all of those things. So this is how you might start out with a very basic offering, but over time, the offering expands. And here are some more examples of how you can add augmenting elements. Augmentation means enhancement or adding stuff. So some of them are services, some of them are at the bottom are more advising and consulting, right? So these are the ways in which you could embellish the generic product. Here's another example from the soft drinks industry. We've looked at portfolios of relationships. Some relationships are purely transactional or one time. Others are, very collaborative and on the right end of the spectrum. Now, in between, what happens is that initially on the left, you might have just some basic product, a Coke or Pepsi will provide you with these, with some syrup and carbon dioxide and so on. But then when it wants to augment its product, it can get into different types of packaging. And in B2B, the packaging would be maybe some signs that restaurants and bars could display, neon signs or other things that help them to attract customers in. And then finally on the right, they could get into all kinds of dispensing machines at the fountain, things that can keep the soda fresh, right? So again, this is how you could expand by getting into new areas, physical attributes, then services, and finally consulting and advice. Or another approach is that you just keep offering, expanding the number of generic products that you have. So this is different from the previous slide. The previous slide is you actually think of getting into new categories of services. But this one is saying within the physical ingredients, maybe you get into offering many different types of natural and artificial flavors. So you're just expanding the spectrum of the physical attributes itself. This is another way to think of more complex mixes of product and service systems. There would be some physical product, there would be some services, and then you could, introduce things in between. Product advice, you could have financing schemes like leasing, and then you could help the customer measure their performance. Okay, does this diagram or chart look familiar to you? I think you may have seen it in previous marketing courses. Yeah? Who can volunteer to explain the product life cycle? Just to recap, do you remember what these stages are? Introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. So the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is that pounds. It could be pounds or euros or dollars, doesn't matter. But you can have a life cycle of revenues and you can have a life cycle of profits. Have you guys seen this before? No? Okay. Should have been covered in a basic marketing course, but let me then explain it if it's not familiar. So this tells you, again, this is the life story of a product from any company. it's not a brand, but it's a new category. This is like, video game consoles or smartphones in general. It is not a specific brand of a specific company. This is industry wide. So you have to accumulate the sales of all the players in the industry. So what this shows is that, introduction is when the product is commercially launched in the marketplace. Before that, it's all pre-launch, which is all the internal investments and resources and activities that you have to do. As a startup, you might have to rent some office space, you might have to hire people, you might have to train them, then they do R&D, right? So all that is pre-launch. As you can see, there's no revenue or profits in pre-launch. Now, when you launch commercially at introduction, you start making revenues, but the profits start a little bit later because there are some initially huge fixed costs. And to recover them, you have to first make some revenue, then you cross the break-even point, and then you start making profits. The growth stage, and you can see that the introduction stage is quite flat. Both the revenue and the profits are small. Okay, so this is the slow part of the life cycle. Then in growth, the demand is established. The market and customers understand the benefits of the product, and they now want to adopt it in large numbers. So, that's why it's suddenly taking off. And then in maturity, the market has saturated. So there are no new customers. You have to think of new sources of growth. Either you have to launch new products or you have to go to new markets. And then if you don't make any additional investments in maturity, then your products are likely to decline, right? There's so many examples of things that we have seen over the years that have declined, right? Nobody, I think, much uses fixed line telephones anymore. So that's an example where that's in decline, right? Printed yellow pages are in decline, right? All kinds of print publications are in decline, right? Cigarette consumption is in decline, right? So now the important thing for marketeers is that your marketing strategy has to be modified for every stage of the PLC. In introduction, you want to spread awareness. Your objective is to make make everyone aware of the product. Okay, I think Vario is in introduction with regard to mixed reality because it's a new technology and they have to do a lot of white papers and conferences and seminars to spread the word about how mixed reality is different from virtual reality and augmented reality. In growth, you have to emphasize capacity. This is the stage of scaling up, right? You have to ramp up manufacturing, you have to ramp up distribution. There cannot be a shortage at this stage, otherwise, you're really disappointing customers and that could kill the future product. So you want to capitalize on growth all the way until maturity. Now in maturity, you might have to worry about cost because what happens in growth is that many competitors jump in. They all see the growth happening. So many new brands will be launched and eventually there'll be price competition at maturity. So you want to, as a marketeer, you want to be able to reduce costs, make things more efficient, improve processes, improve manufacturing, lower the unit cost. That's what the actions are required in maturity. And in decline, you have to decide between two things. Should you gradually reduce the investment. If there's still good revenue, you don't give up. So you milk the revenues and the profits as long as you can, or sometimes you might decide, okay, let's get out of this business altogether. Maybe we sell it or dispose of it. And in any case, from the stage of maturity through decline, you have to, as a company or a business, you have to be thinking about new sources of innovation, new products that will launch a new and different life cycle. Okay. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any comments or questions about the product life cycle. Doesn't you haven't seen this before? It's one of the really important central concepts in marketing. Just like segmentation, targeting, and positioning, the product life cycle is a given. All products will face this, go through these stages if they are successful. If they are not, they might get killed in earlier stages. Okay, then let me resume. So I'm not going to repeat this. I've already given you the description in a nutshell. Okay, this is an important framework. It's called the BCG Market Share Market Growth Matrix. And earlier we talked about a portfolio of relationships. This applies to a portfolio of products. A company like Procter and Gamble has so many different products. So on the vertical axis, market growth is the year over year growth for the entire market, all the suppliers combined. So it's the industry growth rate. And on the horizontal axis, you have relative market share, which is a ratio of your sales to the entire industry's sales. That's what market share is, right? So now I'm sorry, relative market share is your market share divided by your nearest competitor's market share. Okay, so if you have a higher market share than your largest competitor, the relative market share will be above 1.0. And if your market share is less than your largest competitor, then your relative market share will be less than 1.0. So 1.0 is the dividing line along the vertical. So less than 1.0 is considered low relative market share. More than 1.0 is considered high market share. Now and then in market growth, generally the midpoint is double digits. If the market is growing at 10% or more, the growth rate is considered high. If the market growth is in single digits, it's considered low. So for each of your products within your portfolio, you can put them into one of these four squares. Okay, and they have some colorful labels: question mark, star, cash cow, and dog. What is very interesting is that whenever any new product is launched, it always starts out as a question mark, because the market is new, it's not growing at all, and there's hardly any competitors. So you have a very low relative market share. Okay. Now, if the product does well in introduction, and then it might get into the next square on the left. Your relative market share increases. It's a high growth market. That's a star. The star is the product of the future. It requires significant investments to reach its potential. At maturity, the star will drop to become a cash cow because the market stops growing, but you still have a high market share. So this is the product that is going to generate excess cash to fund your stars and your question marks. And end of the product life cycle in decline, the cash cow becomes a dog. So you see there's a movement from the question mark left, then from the star down, and then from the cash cow to the right. That this is very similar to the product life cycle concept. Now the last thing I'm going to discuss in this chapter is the product development process, or the new offering development process. It has got many steps. That is, how do companies come up with brilliant ideas for products or services? It's a very creative process. It starts with idea generation. Brainstorming is one of the techniques of idea generation, where some people who are familiar with the company and its technologies and its people, they might sit together in a room and brainstorm what's the product we should launch maybe next year or 3 years from now, just at a concept level. Okay, then there are some review committees which every 3 months, every quarter, they might collect all the ideas that are generated and screen them. You might screen them just on the basis of feasibility. Does this match our strategy or vision? Do we even have the capabilities to go there? So some ideas will get screened out, and the other ideas will proceed to a business case analysis, where the technical and financial feasibility will be explored in more detail. Okay. Some of the ideas will be again screened out because they don't meet technical or financial feasibility. And then a fewer concepts will be developed. This concept development stage is where you build prototypes. You build models, mock-ups of the product. Okay. If the product was very expensive, you would just use paper mache or cardboard or things like that to test whether there's some major issues, and does the concept need to be modified itself. I'm sorry, the prototype is developed in the next stage. At the concept development stage, you just describe the concept in text or in visuals, in graphics. So you draw out things or you write them out in detail, and then again you look at it, does it make sense or not? And again there's some screening there, and a few ideas are then prototyped, where there some reduced scale model is built. And then you start thinking about a marketing plan, right? What should be the segmentation, targeting and positioning? What should be the 4 Ps? And then you might do a trial launch. You launch the product in a few cities, or you ask a few customers to test it out, and then ultimately you do the commercial launch. So this is a very elaborate process. It might take 18 to 24 months for an idea to go from the first stage to commercial launch. It might cost a lot of money, millions of dollars, and only a small percentage of ideas that are generated will ultimately make it to launch. The number may be hardly 10%. So you can see that the whole purpose of going through this process is to minimize the risk of failure and maximize the chance of success in the marketplace. But it's a pretty conservative process. If some ideas are very radical, then they might not make it through this process. Okay. So with that, I will stop at chapter 10. Any Anybody would like to make any comments or ask any questions? Okay. If not, thank you for your time and attention. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday at 1800. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks, bye.
Bye.